Good day. My presentation is on simplifying advanced early jazz concepts to train young beginner pianists. All right, so it seems like a lot, but we'll get right into it. Okay, so there's a lot of concepts taught in jazz pedagogy, such as like a strong sense of theory. We go over theory a lot, knowing your key centers, different scales and modes to improvise and see, different type of chord qualities, alterations, extensions, more playing by ear than reading really, and of course improvisation. So why this presentation? Um, well, jazz pedagogy usually begins at an intermediate level. It usually happens at more advanced levels. You never at the beginning and not too much at the intermediate. And that's when I kind of want to get better with and find out how to use these tools with young Susie 6-year-old who comes in for their piano lesson. How it can vary from score, and also jazz is really just old pop music. So understanding vehicles for jazz music might also assist in vehicles of pop music and performing that. Understanding motifs, and the most important thing I think is that improvisation is spontaneous composition. Improvisation is spontaneous composition.
Improvisation is spontaneous composition.
Go hand in hand. Composition skills and improvisation skills. Okay. Picture of Lenny Tristano. He was a pianist that first tried to publish jazz piano methods and theories. So they're a bit controversial. They're not my favorite, but he's a good name to know. Okay, so I'm going to break this up into two parts. We have the jazz pedagogy from the historical performance practice, how we know it and study it in an advanced level, and then my take on how to do that in the beginner piano lesson. All right, so we'll look at some historical performers, particularly early 1900s New York City, where both pianos were abundant and jazz performers. The Harlem Renaissance and all that. All right, so key centers and transpositions are very important for the jazz pianist to understand, as there was to accompany singers. Most did it by ear, and singers had to do it in request of their key. In the early 1900s, most speakeasies, sporting houses, cabarets, whatever you want to call them, they all had singing waiters and waitresses. And it was up to the pianist to know how to accompany them in their key. So it was a trademark of any cabaret pianist to be able to play any key, any tune. Because the singers would sometimes even give the pianist a hard time. If they didn't particularly like that pianist or were in cahoots or business favors with a different pianist, they would purposely choose hard keys or yell at them for playing in the wrong key and try to get them thrown out. So pianists really had to be on their toes back then to make sure their transposition skills were up to point. And then, of course, in the Harlem cutting contests, where these pianists would try to outflash each other by playing the same tune in new finessed ways, such as rhythmic vamps or more ornamentation or more intricate improvisations. Art Tatum would do this thing a lot, where he would suddenly change keys right in mid-measure or mid-phrase, just go to an off-a-wall key and do it several times while playing a tune. So this is a strong sense built in jazz piano playing. All right, scales and modes. We use a different set of scales and modes in jazz, such as the diminished. There's always the blues, of course, the Dorian. Those are pretty common things. Glissandos in sixths and thirds. That can happen a little bit. So, for example, as we're playing, if you have a melody, like Mac the Knife, it would be very common to dress anything up in sixths or thirds as much as you can. Chromatic passages, anything you could think of. That was a application of scales and how to use them. So for any of you that have not seen the Jamie Abersol Jazz Handbook, it is a wonderful tool for any musician to have. This is a cool little page I took right out of it. The scale syllabus. This one I really enjoy always looking at. It tells you all the different chord qualities and what scales you can improvise with over them. And you might notice that there's a handful of scales we're not taught in traditional theory, such as the Superlocrian, melodic minor or jazz minor, because it's the 6th and 7th are sharp both flat, sharp both ascending and descending. Lydian dominant, the Spanish Jewish, bebop dominant, bebop minor, bebop major, blues minor, and the fun goes on. Or one of my favorites, the whole tone diminished, which I know has a couple different names also. So jazz musicians must have a knowledge of a decent amount of these scales. I mean, some of these are a bit off the wall, though. All right. Chords. Jazz pianists use lots of extensions. They know how to play a chord anywhere on the piano or voice it depending on the job or ensemble they're a part of. And they also know their alterations. So if we play a C chord, we can vary it up a little bit by doing a parallel chord, such as an A minor 11, you know, or E minor. Tritone substitution is another common one. Instead of a C7, you could switch to a tritone, which also shares thirds or sevenths. Voicings, you got 6/9s, major 13s. We play a lot of the extensions of the chords and talk about how to spread them throughout the piano. It's one of my favorite chords, the C7 alter. And that's another skill jazz pianists have to pick up on. Ear training. That's me with the banana, I had a pretty dead ear. Many of the early jazz pianists could not receive formal training as they were African Americans, and they just couldn't get piano lessons. So a lot of their training was done by ear or by rote. And it was known that, that in these performance scenarios, someone would come by and say, "Oh, can you play this tune?" "Oh, I don't know that tune." And then they would hum it, and someone like Donald Lambert would just hear it once, come up with the accompanying left hand, and play the tune. So let's say someone does, Mac Knife. La, la, la. He'd be like, "Okay." Etc. And transcribing, of course, because they couldn't read, they didn't have scores. So transcribing would come a lot by listening to recordings, or in that time, piano rolls were very big. Okay. Improvisation. Improvisation was done because as these musicians could not read, or some of them could, a lot of them could, some of them couldn't. So they would just learn the motif they had and extend it, using vamping, keeping the form, going into other tunes, rhythmic variations, improvising with motivic development. But a lot of this comes from extending the duration of music, as many people would be doing dances such as two-steps or slip jigs, or quadrilles and other cotillion dances. Sometimes they go on for 30 minutes. So a pianist would have to play and keep the tune alive and going for 30 minutes, as that's how the dance was going. And one thing that's very fascinating is that quoting classical things was a big novelty back then. And I can show here that this was a very strong part of the culture.
The stride piano tradition includes an occasional swinging of a classic song. Here, Don Lambert swings Anitra's
This is the Edvard Grieg tune. And this is very common for New York stride pianists to be playing, especially even in the cutting contests. So this was a very well-known repertoire that people were not really learning by ear. I mean, not learning by score. My apologies. you have the variation. Don Lambert never learned to read. He couldn't read a single note, even though his mother was a piano teacher. Oop. All right. So, how do we bring that to the little ones in the primer level in level 1? How do we do all this? And that's where the fun parts come in. All right. So, key centers and transpositions. How do we start building this? How do we let these children know that they're aware of that? Not even children. It could be people of any age. Well, Autumn Leaves isn't as big as a standard as it was, but, I can use Baby Shark to show a few tricks. All right. So, Baby Shark is just a 3-note motif. Anyone who's on a level 1 of any method book should know D, E, G, and know how to identify that. And then you can move it around. Now, what if we try that starting on G? What if we try that starting on A? What if we try that starting on F? Did they hear the difference? A teacher needs to be able to gauge that. So these are activities we can use to not only help the student understand the concept of transposition and being able to play a motif in several different parts of the instrument, and even with completely different notation, but also for the teacher to gauge what the student can and cannot listen and hear, and how to work on that in the future. And maybe they'll even figure it out on their own. Something doesn't sound right. Scales and modes. Almost all the method books use pentascales of some sorts. In this particular situation, we'll look at the C pentascale. Well, how can we start introducing that there's different scales besides major scale or pentascale? Oh, well, there's the major scale. We'll get to that. But it could be as simple as drawing a picture of a different hand position, just as the method books do, with a flat 2. And this is might be a dated term, I apologize. Spanish or Jewish scale. And you can alter many pieces in this way to have in C5 position, or compose a short score that utilizes this. And then we already start introducing new pitch collections to young musicians, beginner musicians. Chords, it could be as simple as identifying major sounds versus minor sounds. Ear training, asking them with that. Or it could be as simple as changing one of your favorite recital, your first recital song. Well, if you put a couple flats on that score, you can get a different sound. And then you're going to start discussing what is major and what is minor, and what things to look for, and what things to listen for. Playing by ear. I like that in this book I was reading, The Pianist Problem, William S. Newman talks about that. If the student cannot hear tones, no need to pound it in. You just need to be introduced to more theory and more repertoire and get their skills built a little more, but always be monitoring it, and always help them understand how that outlines music. And that's, back to the Baby Shark thing. Can they hear that? It's up to us to monitor that and know the progress and what we can shape around it to build those skills. First melodies. One of the ones I always like to do first is Farajaka. Or you can sing it to them. La, 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 la. Tell them it first starts on C. Cover the hand. And playing by ear. Everyone's got to do it at some point. Improvising. It doesn't have to be jazz improvisation because there's just improvisation. It could be anything. So improvisation can begin on an extremely small level as rearranging. Improvisation is spontaneous composition. Well, asking someone to spontaneous sight read is not going to happen right away. So asking someone to spontaneously improvise might not happen right away either. So we need to look at it as arranging or recomposing. And that could be as simple with a method book song, such as is it improvising if we're adding pedal? This is arrangement decisions right here. And editing decisions. What if we change registers? Or if we add one note. Setting the parameters, of course, there's free improvisation, you could just feel it, but that doesn't really exactly have a teacher assist with different musical concepts and training. So it's up to us to set the parameters. So yeah, that's my small little bit on how I figure out how I'm researching how to use these methods with the little ones. I hope that helps, and if you have any questions, I would love to hear it, or if you want to talk about any jazz theory concepts or scales, I love talking about that stuff.
Okay. Have a good one. Hope you all enjoyed it.